And a very warm welcome to the Captain's Table podcast, brought to you by CMI, the world's leading mentoring partner for board members, CEOs, and the C-suite of leading international companies. We will be inviting some of the biggest hitters in international business to join me, Giles Morgan, around my very special oak table in the salubrious setting of London's world-famous emporium of extraordinary food and drink, Fortnum and Mason. I will ask guests to share their own personal love of food and the lessons of leadership they have learned in their long and distinguished careers, and perhaps hear of the sort of decisions that might be made around tables that look and feel a bit like this one. My guest this week is Wendy Becker, one of the world's most distinguished international business leaders. She has a wealth of experience in consumer goods, fashion, technology, healthcare, telecommunications, and the consulting sectors, particularly those working across borders. Wendy is currently Independent Chair of Logitech International and Independent Non-Executive Director of GlaxoSmithKline. She is Independent Vice Chair of Sony Group Corp and a Non-Executive Director of Oxford University Press. She is also a passionate mentor to global CEOs and executives through her work with CMI. She says of leadership, organizations go wrong in two related areas. First is not considering when bold enough change is required and being clear and honest about the potential implications of those changes. The second is around people, either not throwing enough support behind big leaders who are fighting tough battles each day, or in being more honest and holding up high standards and ensuring you have the best possible talent for the specific job at hand. So let's hear more about how she is helping organizations stay on track. Wendy, a very, very warm welcome to the Captain's Table. Pull up a chair and make yourself at home.
Thank you, Giles. It's fantastic to be here today on such a lovely London day.
Well, first things first, it is a lovely day, and here we are in the heart of London in Piccadilly. I think it's time for a cup of tea or a biscuit, and Fortnum's do pretty mean biscuits, as you know. Do you like Toffolosus, which is covered in chocolate, pistachio and clotted cream, or perhaps salted caramel?
Oh, that's such a list. I'm pretty much a straight shortbread girl myself, actually.
It's sublime, right? I'm going to get
Indeed.
someone to scuttle off and get us some shortbread. Wendy, enough of this rubbish. You have had a very long and very illustrious career. And at the top of the show, I talked a little about the many firms and charities and so on you've worked with. But tell us a little bit, the sort of potted version of how you started and how you got to the places you did.
I think, my themes are always luck and raising one's hand. Those are the two things I believe in. I grew up in America with a slightly crazy life, moving house 15 times by the time I was 15, changing schools every year and doing a variety of different things. And one day I did not have a very well-off family. One day I was in a doctor's office and picked up a magazine in America called Fortune magazine. And it happened to be a episode where they had profiled Fortune 50 CEOs. And I thought, gosh, that life felt different than mine. And that looked really exciting. So sort of set a goal that was what I wanted to do. And I tried to make a set of choices and set myself up to do that from a very, very young age.
So you knew business was going to be the focus. That's where you wanted to go.
I did. I liked the idea of the structure, and I liked the idea of the creativity. And I liked the idea of going to one place every day for work. And I always thought I was going to be a one place every day type of person. But my path, it ended up being very, very different than that. I started my career at Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati because that was lured young graduates with the idea of being president of your own small company. So worked on a variety of products at P&G, all of which I was allergic to. So
what is that? So it's like skincare stuff or stuff
So
like that?
it was Toast deodorant soap, which I don't believe made its way over to Europe. Bounce fabric softener. So these things that had incredible scents, and I have horrible hay fever. And that was it was a fascinating experience because you really, from that experience, learned all about consumers, and you learned about how what you do in business can actually affect everyday life. And that was something that I sought to do with the rest of my career. So was there for a while, which was great. But was not a big fan of Ohio. So went back to business school at Stanford and took off from
Which
there.
you would have enjoyed. I would imagine Stanford was a very better life than in being in Ohio.
Oh, sun every day.
Yeah.
Really super interesting, clever people. It was brilliant, and I saw what maybe the world had to offer. But I graduated with a lot of debt, as one did back in the 80s. So I went to the highest paying job I could possibly get to pay off that debt, which was McKinsey, thinking I'd stay there for a couple of years, but I ended up staying for quite a long time, about 15 years.
P&G and McKinsey, that's amazing, and Stanford, but that's amazing tutelage. That's an amazing kind of learn your apprenticeship, I would imagine.
Yeah, you learned apprenticeship, but you also, these are two incredibly strong values and culture organizations, or they were when I was there. And that really provided a structure and a framework to be creative and to develop one's skills and to understand, what was leadership going to be for me, and developed fantastic networks.
Amazing. And then from there?
Yeah, well, actually, the interesting thing for me at McKinsey was I had two halves of McKinsey. So in the 90s, I was in Silicon Valley as everything was taking off. When I started at McKinsey, it was very exciting to have internet access at the beginning. And by the end, we were thrilled of our time with mobile phones. But at the end of the 90s, a bit of an internet bubble, the first internet bubble hit. And so I used that opportunity to see the world and spent a year traveling with McKinsey around the world and landed myself back in London in the end of 1999. And in the 90s, I spent a lot of time with McKinsey thinking about how do you make McKinsey an even better place to be. So did a lot in terms of long-term strategy. And that awakened my interest in technology, my interest in innovation, and my interest in change, which I then was able to follow through when I left the firm.
And there was a good time at Vodafone, which would have been a fascinating time in terms of that harnessing of instant moving technology and technology moving at pace every day.
Yeah, no, exactly. When I left McKinsey, it was, did one of my most favorite jobs ever, actually. It was at Carphone Warehouse, where I worked with Charles Dunstan in an incredibly entrepreneurial environment, which was just a totally different world than McKinsey. But, again, in this idea of leadership and this idea of innovation and this idea of how do you bring things back to customers, working with Charles and just an outstanding cadre of people was fantastic. And from there, I went to Vodafone. So very local to very global technology, working across 10 different businesses on their brand, working on sponsorship, working on software, and saying how do you bring technologies and innovation to the market that's as relevant in Africa as it is in Kensington. And so that was super fascinating. Again, this theme of innovation, consumers, and providing leadership to a group of people that were committed to a goal was really reinforced. So from there, I took a foray, again, back to wanting to work with entrepreneurs and founders and being in a world of innovation and change, and joined Jack Wills first as chief operating officer and then as chief executive, which was all about saying, how do you really get to know teenagers who fall in love with your product and teenagers fall out of love with your product, and manage that cycle while the internet and social media was taking off. And it was fabulous.
So that, it's obviously a massively different company in terms of what Jack Wills produces, but you are applying the knowledge of technology and adoption, presumably, and the young adoption to help within that marketing and to push the business.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that business is all about people. And if you know how to set clear goals if you know how to communicate those goals and you know how to get people excited about that, and then clear roadblocks for them, to kind of get out of their way and reach for things that they might not have thought about doing, it's all kind of the same. You have to make capital bets differently. And, I've learned that in my board career. But there's a lot of tenets which go across companies and across industries.
And just to finish off the sort of last decade, what's that look like? Because I know you've gone plural, as the expression is, and you work across a lot of sectors, actually. How do you divide all of that up?
Yeah, when I left McKinsey back in 2007, 2008, I joined the board of Whitbread. And I really didn't know what the heck I was doing. So I was clearly lucky in landing that opportunity. But what I realized actually as a board member, again, it's the same thing. It's about inspiring the executive. It's about making sure you're clear on your North Star and removing roadblocks and understanding what are big decisions and what are not big decisions. So I have done a variety of boards working across industry, whether that's Whitbread, Oxford Nanopore, and now Sony and GSK and Logitech.
You must reflect back on your career to date and go, this sort of breadth of different experiences it fills one's experience bucket just so completely that helps you then going in the future, presumably with other either existing positions or other things that haven't yet come.
I think when you grow up moving house as many times as I do and changing school as many times as I do, you can either approach all of these new situations as daunting and overwhelming or something you can learn from. And if it doesn't work out, then you move on to the next thing. So I love variety. I love change. And I think, you can learn something from everybody you work with and in every context you work with. And so that helps bring things from business to business.
And talking of variety, as you know, we're sitting here in the Fortnum & Mason world-famous Diamond Jubilee Tea Salon, and it's known for not just its extraordinary food and drink, but also for the vast array of different teas and all the things that Fortnum does so completely deliciously. But in the world of business, and you've been at the helm of business for a long time, I know that many deals and conversations are brokered around such tables at lunches and dinners. You've probably been to a few memorable restaurants in a business context. Does one stick out either because of a deal done or because of the people you had around the table that you just remember, gosh, that was an extraordinary event to be part of?
I think one of the things anybody who lives a life like I do is hopefully you wake up every day appreciating your privileged position and appreciating that the opportunities you are afforded only because you're in those positions. And so for me, extraordinary experiences come out of fantastic conversations with extraordinary people. And so I have a number of those that I can think of where you have 2 or 3 different people around a table that you sit down and you think, gosh, I didn't really know this person beforehand. And you fall upon a common experience or a common aim or a common goal. And common goal is the most interesting to, create that moment of magic that you both say, how can I go take forward? And those are probably the experiences I remember most clearly.
And knowing the team at Chair Mentor International at CMI, where I know a lot of their mentoring that they will do will happen around a breakfast or lunch or even dinner. What do you think it is about the table and business? What is it about the dynamic, or is it about relaxation? What do you? It sort of changes. It changes attitude somehow.
Yeah, no, I think I think tables are really different by cultural context. So. My husband's Italian. I spend a lot of time in Italy. Those meals are incredibly vivacious, and the business conversation there is passionate. It's like the food. I don't know. People get into issues. They argue about issues. They believe in issues. They stand for things. That's really exciting. I think the table in England is very interesting. I remember I had a dinner once when I was the chief marketing officer of Vodafone. And we had I was talking person next to me who was a very important person, having an incredibly social conversation for the first 3 minutes, and then an incredibly commercial conversation. And then all of a sudden, the next course came, and somebody said, "Change with fish." And you immediately, that person completely ignored me for the next course. And that was odd as an American, because in America, a table is really about welcoming. It's about overabundance of food. And I think that the conversation there is much more social.
Do you prefer a round table or a rectangle?
Oh, I'm definitely a round table person. And not too big, because I like to have those moments when you can shout across the table or not too loudly across the table, make a suggestion. And I think that those dynamics are important.
I wondered, are you a cook?
I am a big cook, actually.
If I was going to invite myself to your house, which I probably will, so beware, pirates do that. That's what captains do. What would you cook for me?
I do have to reveal a deep, dark secret that I own 750 cookbooks.
Is that right?
Exactly. I do, really. And so I don't know. I don't know you, Giles, very well. So I would definitely do on the safe side. We would clearly have a pasta or a risotto to start. I make a mean Parmesan risotto. We'd start out with that. And then I would suggest you're probably, I'd say you might like a fish course next, as opposed to a big roast. So we would probably have
love fish. Yeah, keep that maritime thing going.
Exactly. And then, of course, we would have to have a light lemon pudding to finish off with a little bit of shortbread.
Oh, with the shortbread, which is conveniently brought by our sponsors here at Fortnum & Mason. How beautifully done, just tied in, lovely. And I wondered, other than me, as your senior guest, but if you had two or three other guests of people alive or dead, people you admire, people that you would love to have around your round table, who would they be?
Yeah, look, I like energy. I like ideas. I like conflict. I like it all around my dinner table. So I would pick people who embody that. I'd probably pick actually Sir Paul Nurse, who I think is fascinating in the area of science. I would pick one of the young biotech engineers that I'm seeing around Boston, because I think that there's an unlimited amount of energy they bring. I would probably bring Elon Musk, because I think he would certainly mix it up. And I would probably bring along one of my favorite Japanese architects, because I find people so fascinating in that space. And then I might just throw Michelle Obama in, because what a great person to have dinner with.
My God, that's a hell of a table. I'd probably help you serve the food or so. I don't think I'd be coping with the conversation.
We would definitely be serving a good, healthy dose of a red wine as well to keep the conversation going.
I can do that. So, Wendy, you're aware that Fortnum & Mason, well, you may not be aware that Fortnum & Mason claimed to have invented the recipe to the Scotch egg. And they also, within their jams and marmalades, have their all sorts of secret hacks and recipe secrets to make their stuff a little bit more remarkable. And I wondered if you had, along the way, any sort of tips and success hacks that you'd learned, or things, or bon mot of wisdom that people have passed down to you that you felt had helped you on your way.
There's a number. First of all, I think it's tips and tricks is really important. I think careers, people talk about big, grand strategies, but really you can control so little of your career. That actually tips and tricks and making decisions in moments make a big difference. So for me, tips and tricks. Number one is always aim high, have incredible ambition, appreciating that it may not work out and you may end up in a different place, but that idea of movement and momentum is critical. Along those lines, always raise your hand. The number of times that I've been offered a odd opportunity that made sense to nobody else. When I've had a number of those times at McKinsey, when I left McKinsey to go to Carphone Warehouse, that would have been another example of those that just on the outside don't feel logical, but you can make something of these great opportunities. I think that's a second one. Third is, I think my father always used to say to me about failure, what's the worst thing that can happen? Being clear about what your plan B is always, but not being afraid of having to use your plan B. That's an important one. And then lastly, treating people with respect and developing humility to understand you don't need to know everything. When you're thrown into new situations all the time, you're not going to know things. So being confident in that and comfortable with that, I think it would be another.
This season of The Captain's Table is brought to you by global mentoring organisation CMI. CMI is the world's leading mentoring partner for group CEOs, group CFOs, and senior executives, delivering mentoring for leaders by leaders. With a depth of expertise that's unmatched, they specialise in accelerating leadership performance and impact in the world's largest global companies. CMI's mentor roster is made up of chairs and former CEOs of some of the biggest and most complex international organisations. So whether it's navigating the complexities of stepping into new senior leadership role or making strategic decisions under scrutiny, CMI's seasoned mentors provide confidential, tailored guidance to steer you towards success. Did you have inspiration from individuals or people who helped you refine your own direction in terms of that leadership as you get to leadership as opposed to apprenticeship?
Yeah, no, I think, leadership is a journey that one develops over life. And I think my leadership journey started, 45 years ago or so. And your leadership is honed in difficult moments with people who can point out different paths than you might have thought about originally. And in moments of truth, when you have to go back and find your values. So at my university, which, 250 years in, I was the first president of the student body. And so they touted me around at Christmas one year to go talk to alumni. And two of the places they took me to were all male clubs that I had to enter through the kitchen. And so, you had a leadership moment to decide, were you going to mention that when you got up to give your speech? And the first time I didn't, and I didn't feel very good about it. And the second time I did, and I did it a little bit awkwardly. But finding ways to speak your truth, that makes a difference. I did not have a passport until I was 24 years old. I had an incredible mentor who explained to me, this obligation of changing and making the world a better place. And so this idea of raising aspiration about global change and what an important role as an American at that point, I needed to play. I think of leadership at McKinsey, where that was really ground into me by colleagues who gave opportunities to make speeches, who gave opportunities to lead projects, and pushed you out of your comfort zone. All of those are moments. So what I now try to do as somebody who coaches leaders or helps leaders or mentors leaders is push people out of their comfort zone, help them see what they might be able to achieve that they can't see in themselves, and help them find their voice to be authentic to who they are.
You talked about this, and it sounds like McKinsey in particular. Sounds like there was a lot of kindness and a lot of generosity in terms of how you were set up in order to give you opportunities to learn. Would that be fair? That was one of its great advantages. You were getting exposed to amazing projects and clients of McKinsey, but not only that, but then being put into the jump seat to get going and to do it.
I've been really fortunate to work in a lot of companies where talent makes all the difference. Talent and magic. And we don't use that word in business very often. But if I see what people are doing at Sony, it's bringing magic to life. I see what's happening at GSK. There's an incredible amount of magic that fuels the science. And I think if you're working in organizations that are full of magic, you need to appreciate that is created by people, and humans need kindness and nurturing and development, but they also need straight feedback. And so creating a context in which you can build trust and you can set relationships to give honest feedback is truly important.
And do you have memories of leadership that you encountered along the way that you vowed you would never emulate, i.e. the people that you saw in a leadership position where you go, that is not the way to do it?
Yeah, I think we all have. And one of the exciting things I think about becoming more senior in your journey is to be able to see a lot of things, but also to feel more comfortable with your failings, which helps you see different things. So I've seen, people who bully. I've seen people who shout. I've seen people who just don't come to work with goodwill. Charles Dunstan always used to say, you have to assume everybody comes to work every day wanting to do a good job or thinking they're doing a good job. And that mantra, I think, is critical. People who assume politics, people who assume bad will, that's not setting anybody up for success.
As we all get older and a lot, as you say, more senior, you get the opportunity to bring on the next generation and to be a mentor. And I know that's exactly what CMI and Chair Mentor International does. Do you enjoy it?
I love mentoring people, and I've considered an incredible privilege. I mentor formally, first generation college students. I mentor charity chairmen, but I love mentoring people within business. I love mentoring all of them, but people within business who want to make a difference, because people who enter into a mentoring relationship, are seeking to get better. And so to be able to provide frameworks, to be able to provide coaching, and sometimes just to be able to change direction is a fascinating way to spend this part of my career.
I mean, your career is so diverse, as you say. The 15 houses that you lived in set you up well for adjustment. When you and I are a similar vintage, and so we've lived through this technological revolution, as we all have, the world has. What do you think the qualities are for leaders today, and particularly future leaders, and how they can prepare themselves, whereby technology has changed the rule book entirely, about even from something as simple as presence in the office, to be remote working, to speed of change, to it went from email to every other kind of channel. It's a very different, faster paced world. What are those leadership skills that are required in the modern era, or are they the same?
I think a bit of both. I think I think the world has become incredibly fast-paced. I think the world has become fast-paced in change, but also fast-paced in judgment, and fast-paced in comfort in changing direction. So leaders, to me, have to be very clear on their values. What do they stand for? What makes a difference? Where are your personal red lines? And you have to keep going back to that. And one's values are defined both across your professional life, but also your personal life. So that, I think, is critical. I think, secondly, certainly more than feels like 40 years ago, leaders have to be incredibly aware of external context. And external context is both your customers, it's your shareholders, but actually external context is what is happening in geopolitics. External context is what's happening in cultural trends. I think we're all learning so much about changes and expectations in society. And external context requires us also, I think, to be better communicators as senior leaders and much more external facing in our leadership and not just internal facing in our leadership. So what that implies to me, and what I see in really fabulous leaders, is people who are comfortable taking risks, who are comfortable making change, but who also are really clear about their North Star and what they want to achieve. And so it is a different leadership experience, but fundamentally in businesses, you need to be clear on communication, you need to be clear on strategy, and you need to drive progress through others.
Oh, I love that idea of being true to yourself and letting other people understand what your truth is and what your belief system is. Allows people to intersect with you and understand you. And I think from a leadership point of view, that's brilliant. I wondered, on this career, you've been helped. We've all been helped along on our journey. I wondered if there are people that perhaps along the way that obviously helped you, but maybe people you'd never got the chance to say thank you to. Are there one or two people that you had wished, if you could go back time and say that gosh, just thank you for the mentorship, the leg up, the advice. I just, as I get older, I look back and go, oh gosh, I wish I'd said something to someone.
Okay, you've already admitted, Giles, so we're in the same vintage. So I will admit I've passed my 50th birthday. When I turned 50, I was trying to figure out how to celebrate. And I thought, actually, this should be a year of thanks. So I listed the top 25 people who most impacted my life, good and bad, who are not relatives. And sadly, 2 of them had passed away. But I went and found all of them around the world. And I didn't tell them what I was doing, but just to do that, to kind of step back and say, we had a conversation when I was 17. You wrote a reference for me when I was 25. You treated me really horribly when I was 32 and had a reconciling and a Thanksgiving year that was really fabulous. And what I learned from that, with a little bit of distance, one is it's never too late to say thank you. That 2, as you're going through all these things and you're having your moment, actually, so is the other person on the other side of the table. And we forget about that sometimes when we send our story. And 3, it's really good to punctuate that people are not locked in their 23-year-old selves when you re-meet them. So it was, I would highly recommend that to anybody. It was the best thing I've ever done.
I'm going to have to do that for my 60th year. I think I missed the 50th boat. I think that's absolutely what a fantastic thing to do. Because as you say, your 20-year-old self and people move on. We all move on. And it's not a moment in time. Gosh, that's special. Wendy, we now move to the part of the show which is called the Captain's Broadside, which is where I ask you a sort of series of fairly ridiculous questions that interest me. And I'm going to take you away from the kitchen and indeed the boardroom. Do you have your own fan passion, a fan of sport or music or entertainment, something that really just gets you absolutely in a state of fever pitch?
I really like food, actually. I know we're supposed to move away from the point of the podcast.
No, we don't have to. We don't have. Fortnums will love you. They've got lots of cookbooks.
I have my 750 cookbooks. I set out a goal for myself in 2011 to be fully self-sustaining. 2014, which I've just about done. So I grow a lot of vegetables. I love restaurants. I think it's so fascinating because it's creative. It's mathematical, which, so intellectually, it's quite interesting. You get to share with people you love. And then you start getting into what an interesting thing in terms of global food supply chains and things like that are. So I love food.
Well, and listen, we are in the right place. And I'm pretty certain that you won't have a Fortnum & Mason cookbook. And I happen to know they've just got one out. So I'm going to talk to their CEO, Tom Atherin, and see if we can get you a copy because I know he'll be delighted. But I wonder where that started. You've got a love of food. Did that come from a parent? Did that come from later on in life? Where did that passion for food beyond eating come from?
I really believe in the power of the dinner table. I believe in the power of sharing. I believe in the power of making people feel good. And there's a commonality to it, which I think is super interesting. And it's a fantastic way. As somebody who's a global traveler, I spend a lot of time in Japan. I spend time in Italy. I spend time in the US, and I spend a lot of time on an airline. What is the commonality across all that? It is food. And so that's a great way to get to know cultures and different people.
It certainly is. And I wondered, when you're traveling around the world, and you will have done a lot, I wonder what song you sing in the shower.
Okay, that's off limits.
You don't sing in the shower?
Oh, I do. I don't know. Actually, when I moved, my second passion to food is music. And when I moved to the UK and I was trying to understand how do you get your mind around a culture, our offices were over the Virgin Megastore in Piccadilly.
Wow. Okay.
And I would go down every Friday. I booked an hour and I would go. They used to have these big headsets to listen to the now 61, now 47, whatever. So I could learn the music. So I thought if I learned the music, I would learn the culture. And that has carried with me. So I always now try to listen to the latest Sony artist to understand,
Of
to
course.
kind of understand the moment.
And do you love to sing? Are you a good singer? Can you hold a tune?
I'm a horrible singer, but I love music. I love music.
And let me ask you then, this is an interesting one. I'm going to use the term advisedly, or the word advisedly. What was your first album?
My first album, I had Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I got I got a music player from my father, and I was that and Jefferson. At that point, they'd changed to Jefferson Starship, so I got 2 tapes that I played all summer.
and that's what we did, isn't it? We didn't have that many, so you just kept playing them, and you knew every word. And I wonder what your first gig that you ever went to was.
Oh, my first gig. I think my first gig, okay, now we're really dating ourselves. I went to go see the Grateful Dead.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Now that puts you are now top of the tree for coolness on the captain's table.
I was living in California at that point, and that was kind of the thing you did.
Go, Wendy Becker. That's outstanding. And do you remember your first car that may have taken you to your first gig?
Oh, I definitely remember my first car. It was a tiny little Honda Civic, about 6 years used old. I had to pay for it myself. I had to pay for the insurance. I had to pay for the petrol. So I remember it very, very well. And
I wonder if it's still the car that deep down you love best of all.
Oh, that's deep, actually. I really prefer Formula One cars to that car, I will have to admit.
Well, at Vodafone, you had a good experience with them. You were very involved, I think, in Formula One.
No, exactly. At that point, we were sponsoring McLaren. So I have fond memories of Lewis Hamilton flying me into Silverstone one year, but actually being able to sit in those cars is fantastic. They're tiny.
And my final question, when you're not gallivanting around the world and doing the many, many things that you're doing, where's your favorite place for a holiday, a vacation?
I really love being in the mountains of New Hampshire. I think as leaders, we need to find ways to break free and to reconnect with nature and to reconnect with what's important. So, getting exercise, climbing a big mountain in a beautiful place is just fantastic for me.
And we're kind of in October, and I would imagine that New Hampshire, where you live, is probably looking as perfect and beautiful as it possibly can be during the fall.
Yeah, no, for my, you haven't asked me where to do my travel advert for, but it would certainly be New Hampshire from the last week of September through the middle of October, as leaves are changing, and it's really magical.
I'm told it's insane, so I'm going to be inviting the current Mrs. Morgan to come and join me on a trip when she gets some time off. Wendy, I have taken up enough of your time. You have been such a wonderful guest, and thank you for sharing so much of your insight, your experience, and your love of food. And thank you so much for coming on the Captain's Table.
Thank you, Giles. Really, always a pleasure.